look at Generation X, some influences and events on their lives. Small size of the generation, there are only 34 million Generation Xers alive today. There are 76 million baby boomers, so more than twice as many. And do you think Generation Y is bigger or smaller? Bigger. 70 million Generation Yers. So huge boomer generation, huge Y generation, little tiny Generation X in between there. And in the past, what we've done is we've kind of tried to make them into little miniature baby boomers. And what we found was that it didn't work very well, and it shouldn't, because Generation X brings some things that we very much need. And one of those is that straight line way of thinking about things. Change to many family structures. You talked about lots more single parent families. Pervasive influence of technology. Just the assumption that technology is going to be everywhere. When I was doing some of my research at University of Nebraska, my research partner was a Generation Xer, and she was just barely old enough to be in research, and we were using video discs at the time, and neither one of us had done anything with video discs before. And she said, well, let's sit down, and we booted it up, and it was supposed to be a touch screen, and that was kind of a new thing at the time. Well, we touched it all over and it wouldn't move. And we touched it some more and it wouldn't move. And she said, well, let's just turn it off and boot it back up. And I said, oh, you can't do that because it doesn't say exit. And she said, well, it doesn't say anything. And I said, well, but it doesn't say exit, so you can't turn it off. So we sat there for about 10 minutes and it did nothing. And she said, well, I'm going to just turn it off. And I said, no, we can't do that. And neither one of us really knew much about video discs or computers. And she said, well, I'm not going to just sit here and look at this thing. So she said, I'm going to go to lunch. If you want to just sit and watch it, feel free. And I said, okay. So she went to lunch. I sat. It did nothing. And I did a few other things. She came back from lunch and she said, well, why don't you go to lunch and I'll sit and watch it for a while. And I said, okay. And I got just down the hall, and you know that musical sound when the computer comes back on? Well, I heard that. And I went running back down there and I said, you turned it off. And she said, I know. And she said, and you knew I would, but you couldn't bear to watch me do it. And that was really kind of true. And we didn't lose any data, so it wasn't a problem. Loss of heroes and heroines. I had a chance to be involved in some research that was done in Lincoln where we looked at Generation Xers and we asked them who their heroes and heroines were. And what we really thought they were going to say was either movie stars or sports stars or music stars. And it was not any of those people. It was their parents or their grandparents in most cases. And I felt like saying to them, you need to go write a letter and tell that person that you just said they are your hero or your heroine. Concern about AIDS, greater cultural diversity, and an understanding of cultural diversity and why they need to know about it. How many of you have ever enjoyed eating cheesecake or drinking a smoothie? Well, Generation X was around when those first came out. Munching on trail mix or granola bars. Yeah. Getting cash from an ATM. Imagine life before ATMs and debit cards. Recording on your VCR. And it used to be when Generation Xers were kids, they would get called by everybody in the neighborhood to come over and reset the clock on the VCR because nobody older could figure out how to do that. Playing hacky sack. How many of you have ever played hacky sack? Okay. Using a Post-it. Again, imagine life before Post-its. We had to paper clip everything on or Scotch tape it on. Talking on a cell phone. And again, life before cell phones. That's really hard to believe. Do you ever watch old movies and think, gosh, if they just had a cell phone, they could call and this movie would be over in like 5 minutes because there would be no plot. Well, here's kind of what Generation Xers looked like as young people. This is a group of Nebraskans who went to Capitol Hill. And another group, big on dressing alike, as you might notice. And you know that like swing choirs in your own schools today have a tendency to dress similarly but not exactly identically. Some attributes of Generation X employees, customers, and clients. They're good at change. I'm going to ask you to try something and we'll see how good you are at change. Clasp your hands if you can and see which thumb comes out on top, your left thumb or your right thumb. How many have your left thumb on top? Okay, you're doing it correctly. No. How many have your right thumb on top? Okay. Yeah, I don't know why. It's about 2/3, 1/3 always. Okay, now unclasp and clasp the other way so your other thumb comes out on top. Doesn't that just feel wrong? and somebody sitting beside you does it that way, and most of us do it the same way. We've done it the same way our whole life. So if you look at a picture of yourself as a baby, if you were clasping your hands, you probably had the same thumb on top. Well, something to think about is, as some of you are looking at becoming entrepreneurs, you will have to change some of the things that you're doing. And it is absolutely possible to do that. Try it the other way, what feels like the wrong way, 3 or 4 times, and see if it feels like it gets easier. If you did that several times a day for 21 days, would it be easier? Yeah. It takes 21 days to learn a new habit, so it would never feel like the good old way. Now, as you work with adults who have been doing things one way for a really long time, realize they can also learn how to do something differently, but they've been doing it the good old way for a really long time. So it's going to need to be a patient process as those changes come down the pike. Generation Xers are not very brand loyal. They're always checking out the options. They care a lot more about how much something costs than what the brand is. Very comfortable with technology, pretty independent. And so one of the things that employers have been concerned about is that Generation Xers aren't big on being team players. They've done that, they've kind of been there, done that on the ball field, for example, and so now they're ready to get to work and get things done, and it doesn't seem to them like you get things done as quickly if 5 people are doing it on a team. They're financially savvy and creative. They're not intimidated or impressed by authority. A lot of Generation Xers just skip right past their boss and go right to the owner of the company or the CEO. And I've had some CEOs, I had a CEO at a manufacturing plant in Lincoln who said, some of those young employees just come in my office and sit down. And I said, well, do you talk to them? And he said, well, I do, but he said, at their age, if I went in somebody's office and sat down, I would just be wanting to rest. And he said, they come in and they ask me questions. And I said, well, what kinds of questions do they ask? And he said, oh, really hard questions. He said, I had a person who came in one day and said, do you think this company follows its mission statement? And he said, I had to run out in the lobby and read it. And he probably helped write it. Now, have you written mission statements yet? You will, as time, and some of you have written them for businesses or for projects. One of the things about a mission statement is it needs to be general enough that it lasts over time, but specific enough that it helps drive and helps you make decisions about what you're doing. They want to be able to buy just the basics and not the luxuries. And their view of entrepreneurship generally is that it's a little too risky. If you could work for somebody else and have a job, that's a good thing. What's changing, though, is Generation Xers really, really want to be home with their children. And so if there's a chance to work from home, both moms and dads are saying, you know, if there's that opportunity, I would think about being an entrepreneur.